What is and what is not Hispanism? There's a lot of mythology on the internet about what is Hispanism. Is it a fascist ideology from the extreme right? Is it a Nazi supremacist ideology that hates indigenous people, putting white people first? Does it consist of believing and spreading the white legend of the Spanish Empire, etc., etc., etc.? It is very difficult to define what Hispanism is because Hispanists themselves have not yet come to an agreement on its formal definition. Hispanism as an ideology is a new phenomenon, although it has its roots in the writings on Hispanic heritage. Authors have had differing perspectives and yet share common opinions regarding Hispanism. So new that the dictionary of Academia Real still has not recognized it as an ideological movement. The word has only been utilized when referring to scholars of Hispanic culture or when defining terms outside of ideological thinking. All Hispanists agree that we must defend our Spanish language, have respect for Catholic heritage, celebrate the multi-ethnic value of mestizaje among all Hispanics without hierarchies based on race, and seek the union of Hispanic peoples who were previously part of the Spanish Empire that now share a common Hispanic culture. Any Hispanist who does not understand this would be claiming to be something that he or she does not understand and knows nothing about. Hispanism is absolutely antagonistic to racial supremacy that was born in enlightened and Protestant Europe, a supremacy that would end up paving the way for Nazi ideology. Nazism is probably the most opposing ideology to Hispanism, since the National Socialist idiosyncrasy would consider our beloved mestizaje as an act of heresy among many other things. Of course, Hispanism is not fascism, nor is it Francoism. In fact, the Franco regime itself paid homage to Simón Bolívar and placed a statue in his honor in Madrid, something that very few Hispanists would approve of. Even if there are fascists who consider themselves as Hispanists, something that is completely possible and in fact occurs, Hispanism has no necessary link with fascism, nor with any other concrete political party. This confusion derives from progressives who believe that everything that sounds like patriotism is fascism. Hispanism seems fascist to them. They falsely attribute it to fascism as they do, for example, with the celebration of October, which is not an invention of Franco, but has its origins in Argentina. Hispanism is not Spanish nationalism, since it does not focus on Spain, which is just one part of a much larger whole that is La Hispanidad, Hispanic heritage. And no, my dear indigenous activists, Hispanism does not serve Spain as a tool to convert all of Latin America into a colonized empire. As Hispanists, it is not necessary that we all be Catholic, monarchical, anti-communist, or anti-liberal. To be a Hispanist, one thing is clear. You cannot confuse our Hispanic heritage with Catholicity. They are not the same. Poland, for example, is more Catholic than Spain, but not for that reason is it more Hispanist, or more Hispanic. In fact, Poland is absolutely not Hispanic. Catholic means universal, and Hispanic, for good or for worse, is not universal. It is a community, like so many others in the world, and it is far from the only one. Neither is there an agreement whether or not the Spanish Empire should be restored, or if Hispanic countries should form a federation or confederation or a union of states. We should first think of a union of states like the European Union, but without repeating its resounding failure, based on the dominance of a single member over all the rest. Later on, down the line, we can figure out what Hispanics want, but at the moment, we have to begin with a simple first step. Hispanism is an ideology with economic, political, and cultural implications. However, it is not a concrete political ideology per se. This means that Hispanism does not fall within the political spectrum like social democracy, liberalism, communism, or conservatism. This is why both communists and monarchists can consider themselves as Hispanists. Nevertheless, it has been debated whether Hispanism is exclusively for Catholics and monarchists. However, it is here that we enter into the philosophical plane. In my opinion, Hispanic culture, La Hispanidad, is made up of each and every single Hispanic, and each and every single one of them has the right to our heritage and to defend it equally. To put requirements for Hispanists would be like turning Hispanism into a closed club where the defense of Hispanic heritage would be only within the reach of those few who meet those requirements, as if Hispanics who do not meet those requirements were less Hispanic. In addition, it is completely impossible to build an alliance of so many millions of people and make them all think exactly the same. Another great sin by some Hispanists is to belittle pre-Hispanic cultures, and this is where I can't agree with those who say that the Mexica Empire was the worst in all of history, based on exaggerated figures of those who were slaughtered per year. Numbers that were presented by the historian Prescott. These are estimates that have no supporting archaeological sites. The number of deaths caused by the Mexicas for over 100 years would be estimated at 2 million, which is a figure that the English easily reached with their engineered famines in India. The supremacist and industrialized exterminations on behalf of the British Empire or the Nazis are incomparable with the sacrificing of the Mexica people, who would practice this based on their beliefs that human sacrificing was vital for their gods and for the continuity of their lives. This was done out of superstition. However, I believe it is an error to assume that the Mexica people were more genocidal than the British Empire, who was a mortal enemy. Pre-Hispanic culture has its own accomplishments and errors, like the Spanish Empire. The pre-Hispanic culture also makes up our mestizaje. Therefore, it seems counterproductive to me if any Hispanists were to belittle or even demonize the indigenous culture, unless you need to enrage indigenous activists who seek to lie about Hispanic history and culture. Then it would be completely acceptable. Also, it would be completely counterproductive to fall into the white legend about the Spanish Empire, describing it as a happy paradise because it would be historically inaccurate and would hurt credibility. Despite enormous progress in the area of human rights that existed in the Spanish Empire compared to the rest of the world during this time period, it was still very hard, and I'm sure that none of us would prefer to live during that time. There also exist a few Hispanics who find themselves as fanatic as indigenous activists, crazy people who wish to restore the Holy Inquisition. Honestly, you don't owe them any attention. After explaining what is and what is not Hispanism, and without trying to look like Moses of Hispanism, I would like to give some commandments in order to clarify. I think most Hispanists can agree on these points, and more can be added on later. You should place Hispanism before your nationality or your political ideology. Never discriminate against a Hispanic sibling, especially regarding their race, something that is unfortunately quite common among Hispanics. Never be anti-Catholic. Anti-Catholicism attacks historically the Hispanic spirituality. You should defend Hispanic heritage and Hispanism whenever you see them threatened. You should defend the union and the economic, social, military, and political cooperation among Hispanics. Never support a leader who subordinates your country to foreign powers. Never justify an invasion by a foreign military within a Hispanic country. Hispanism strives to be the glue that joins the broken pieces of our societies, divided by fratricidal wars between Hispanic republics. Hispanism counters indigenous activist hate speech and the racism that pits indigenous people against whites and the whites against the blacks, etc. If our societies are this fragmented, it is because they do not have a feeling of kinship like the one that Hispanism provides as a model for society that allows our equal expression because we are all equally Hispanic.